All right, good afternoon once again, and welcome to another edition of Google Plus Hangout for Channels V. My name is Victor Matthias, and today we're looking at the bank charges that were introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria, sometime I think late last year, early this year. But then there's just been a lot of furore going on, customers complaining these charges are too much, or these charges are unnecessary, or these charges just keep coming and they don't have an explanation, and that's our focus today on the program. And joining me to look at that, I have Baba Tunde Le. Tunde, good afternoon, and
Good
welcome
afternoon, Victor.
to the program.
Good
All right,
afternoon, Victor.
good afternoon, Tunde. Once again, welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We also have Najib Bello. Good afternoon as well, and thanks for coming on board.
Thank you, Victor. Good afternoon.
All right. Let me just come back to Tunde. Tunde, first of all, just help us understand these charges. I mean, a lot has been said about it. Customers are complaining. The CBN says you can actually complain to them, but let's first and foremost understand what these charges are. You are in the system. What exactly do these charges stand for, and how justifiable will you say they are?
So the charge that I'm aware of, because I'm not very clear. Off the air, I was asking which of the charges, because there are a couple of charges. The charges that I'm aware of was the ones around introducing a negotiable. What do you call it? Negotiable. They didn't call it COT again. They called it something else. Negotiable transaction charge. That was one, and there's also been the one that's a tax, which is the 50 naira stamp duty tax. I think those are the two recently introduced charges that I am aware of. Yeah, that's about it. Hello, do you get me?
Okay, very well then. Najib, let me just come to you. Tunde is saying that he's just aware of about two charges. You as a bank customer, I mean, I've seen and I've heard, or let me just say I've read about some of your complaints, pockets of complaints, not only you, but other people as well. What were those charges? What were you being charged for? And how continuous has it been? Sorry, can you come again?
Charge. I know about the stamp duty charge.
Okay.
The stamp duty, 5 naira, is supposed to be 5 naira per transaction. But we've heard sometimes people get charged more. Some people have said they've been charged like 5 naira per meal or thereabout. And some have said they get charged on their savings account. That's one of the main complaints some of us have. People being charged 5 naira or more for transfers via their savings account, which the CBN has already stated is not included in the stamp duty charge. Then there are other transactions that are not supposed to even bring any charge at all. Last year, December, if Tunde can remember, some of us that use GT Bank, for instance, we received alerts telling us 100 naira has been deducted from our account. They called it, I think, the ATM maintenance charge, And aside from that, maybe the SMS charges. When we get alerts monthly, the SMS charges have been ramped up, maybe from for some of us that don't do many transactions, we used to get maybe 100 naira max. And now, last month, I got 600 naira for my transaction charges notifications. So those are some of the few ones I can talk about for now.
Okay. So let me just Tunde, let me just come back to you and probably just refresh our memories on these charges that were introduced by the CBN. First and foremost, we have the current account maintenance fee charge. We have the 15 naira stamp duty per transaction, which you had mentioned earlier, and we have the 100 naira EDMMS application fee. We have the 65 naira ATM withdrawal charges, and then we have the NSC/CSCS trade alerts. What can you tell us about these charges?
All right. So there are a couple of. Let me react to Najib quickly. You corrected something already, that the stamp duty charge is meant to be 15 naira, and it's restricted to current accounts, and there are some transactions that are exempt. For example, salary payments are exempt. Self-transfer, so you're transferring from your current to your savings account, even across banks, are exempt. And because of BVM, it's very easy to know if you are the owner of the account, your destination account. Now, having said that, banks have tried to implement, and there might be issues around implementing. And because I understand how complex the banking applications of these financial institutions are, sometimes when they try to implement these directives, and some of these directives come and they say it's with immediate effect, with a threat of fines hanging over the banks. And so they have to implement at least almost immediately. And because of the technology, implementation might not be as seamless as we would like it to be. And so what typically would happen is there's an implementation, and then there are these kind of complaints where, for example, they were supposed to exempt savings accounts, and those savings accounts were included, and people make complaints, and then they fine-tune and fine-tune. That's typically what happens. So a lot of it has to do with the way that the regulations come out. You know, this with immediate effect, do this, and you don't give the banks reasonable or enough time for them to actually do the implementation. Having said that, the ATM maintenance charge, if we cast our minds back, initially banks used to charge 100 naira monthly for ATM maintenance charge, for card maintenance charge. That's actually what it is, your card. Now, not going into the justification or otherwise of the charge, CBN came and said, you know what, stop charging people 100 naira monthly. You are allowed to charge a maximum of 100 naira per annum. So what some banks then decided to do was to prorate this and say, we won't charge you 100 naira once. We'll break the 100 naira up and charge you on a monthly basis. However, some banks decided that at the end of the year, since we can charge you 100 naira per annum, we will just charge you that 100 naira once a year. And I'm guessing that that's the charge that Najib saw that GT Bank, that, like you mentioned, would have charged him. The 65 naira one, I'd written about this before, and it's important for us to understand. There's infrastructure that has been put in place by different stakeholders to facilitate interoperability, or what we call switching, interbank transactions. So today, before all of this infrastructure was put in place, you could only use your cards on your own bank's ATMs, on your own bank's POSs, and things of that nature. However, people made investments to make this happen. All over the world, most of the time, those fees are not regulated by their central banks. Those fees are determined by market forces. However, in our case, the central bank chose to regulate those fees. And it's affected a lot of business cases. I can tell you that for free. So when they removed those charges, and they got feedback from the industry, you are essentially killing this industry. It was the reason why they reintroduced the charges. However, they also modified in such a way that it affects behavior. So if you don't want to be charged, go to your bank. However, if you're going to go to another bank, you have up to 3 transactions in a month to do for free. Beyond 3 transactions in a month, then you need to pay these people for the infrastructure and the service that they render. And that's essentially what some of those charges are. Nigeria, for example, has one of the lowest POS transaction rates in the world. In Nigeria, it's regulated at 0.75%. If you do a POS transaction in Dubai, you're going to be paying as much as, well, not you, the merchant, will be paying as much as 3.5%. And in different places, in some cases, as much as 6% if you're doing a POS transaction in a casino. So all of those things are market driven. I just need to clarify that.
Okay, very well. Najib, Tunde is saying that most of these things are market driven, and he went on to give a very long list of explanations, as to how these things really happen, even making comparisons with how it is here and then how it is outside the country. But let me just come back to you. He made mention of all this moving money, made mention of accounts that are exempt from these charges. What has been your experience? I mean, so far?
That's me
Najib?
or Najib?
Oh no, Najib.
For me, I only operate savings accounts, so I wouldn't know. It's Tunde that should know that. I operate just savings accounts. So for me, my savings account for now have not been affected by the stamp duty charges and are not open for charges for the COT and whatever other charges they mete out. But the SMS charges, the other day I tried to check my account via mobile, which my bank advised, and they charged me 20 naira for checking my bank balance. And that's just for me. For me, I run just 2 savings accounts and I'm not affected by the other charges. So I think Tunde may be in a position to talk about those. I guess he runs a current account or something.
No, there's no need to guess. He's there. You can ask him. Yeah, but I mean that notwithstanding, it has become a problem now because there's been a lot of complaints.
Yeah, there are complaints.
Exactly. So, but let me just ask. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Tunde has said that these charges you're paying for the infrastructure, for the convenience.
Yes.
Do you think it's justifiable?
For me, I think the government and the banks, they have to make money. They're offering services, and for them to offer these services, they have to put in place some things. You understand? And they are offering these services so that their customers can use them. So I'm in support of the banks charging for their services. Now, if the government wants to make some money from people who run bank accounts, from people who have money, there's a way they can do this thing rather than the stamp duty they are charging now. I've always said that the ATM charges, there was a time that the CBN said banks should not charge for ATM transactions. I don't own a bank. Sometimes when I talk about these things, people feel, oh, I'm backing somebody. I don't own a bank. I don't profit from bank transactions. But I said it back then that it would not work. And what happened was that when the banks realized they're not making money from their ATM machines, they stopped servicing them. You go to a bank branch and there are like 5 ATM machines at night and none has cash in it. So it was necessary for them to reintroduce the ATM transaction charges. But I felt 65 naira was too little. I would have preferred 100 naira. 100 naira will make it easy, and even the government themselves, if they want to make money, they can say, okay, from the 100 naira the banks are charging, they get to keep maybe 5 naira each. I am not in support whatsoever of this stamp duty charge. I don't even know what they are stamping in people's monies. I don't know. So I think government should allow banks charge reasonable charges, very reasonable. I'm running an ATM machine here. It costs me money to service and everything. I want to charge 100 naira every time somebody uses it. Whether my customer, whether some other bank's customer, it still costs me money. So the government can say, okay, we'll take 5% of whatever you make from that 100 naira. But these people don't even understand why they are paying, why money will just be sitting in their current account and they say, okay, let me transfer it to so person, and they get charged a fee called stamp duty charge. I think these things have to be restructured for people to easily understand and for everybody to benefit from it.
Okay, very well, Najib. I'll come back to you again, but first of all, Henry, let me welcome Henry Nosegbe. Thanks for coming on board, and good afternoon.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Right. Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
All right, so let me just first of all introduce the other contributors. We have Tunde Leah. Tunde is calling from Lagos, and we have Najib Bello. Najib is also calling from Lagos. If I'm not mistaken, they're almost very close to each other. I'm the one at the other end of the nation's commercial nerve. But let's just get to hear your own thoughts about this bank charges that were introduced by the central bank. Just earlier, before you joined, I think I was listening those charges. There are about 5 of them. But just go ahead first and foremost and tell us what you think about this.
Which one in particular, please?
Okay, so before you joined, I listed about 5 of them, which the CBN actually introduced. First was the current account maintenance fee. The second one, the 50 naira stamp duty per transaction. The 100 naira EDMMS application fee. The fourth one, that's the 65 naira ATM withdrawal charges, and then the NSE CSCS trade alert. Those are the charges we're looking at.
Okay. Well, the ones, to be honest, I'm just hearing about I think the second and the fifth ones, because I hadn't been in Nigeria for a while. But I'll focus on the ones I know about, which is the one about the stamp duty and the 65 naira ATM charge. Okay, so the way I see it, I see it as an reintroduction of COT by other means, because we are aware that some years back the CBN was trying to make the banks move away from depending on commission income to depending on fee income income from loans and advances. So the objective was to try to make banks move away from depending on income from COT and all to depending on loans. So they were trying to make them give out more loans and advances to the real sector and all of that. Now, in order to achieve that, they had a policy where they were going to phase out COT gradually. And so this year, 2016, was supposed to be the year. Now, if you look at this, if you look at the stamp duty, it, to all intents and purposes, it's almost like the COT, really. You are trying to introduce the COT through the back door. And for those who have defended the policy making use of the Stamp Duty Act, I'm not yet sure as to what specific provision of the Stamp Duty Act covers or makes specific provision for bank transactions being part of the transactions that are due for stamp duty. I'm not sure the Stamp Duty Act specifically provides for that. So I'm not yet convinced as to the legality of the charge, first and foremost. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not very convinced as to the legality of the charge. First and foremost, I think it should be tested in court. The court needs to make a definitive statement about this as to whether bank transactions are part of COT charges, are part of the transactions that should be charged stamp duty. I think that should be tested by the court, but it doesn't look legal to me. For the 65 naira ATM charge, I think I would align with what the gentleman before me said. It's more like a way of trying to recover the cost of operating those ATMs, because they feel, I'm sure the banks believe that the cost of operating those ATMs are quite expensive and they need to recover the cost somehow, which is what I think is the rationale behind it. Now, there's nothing, of course, preventing the CBN from, or preventing the banks from trying to recover those costs. So I won't say I have much to say with regard to that. I would say they have the right to put those charges. But my main concern had been with the one about the stamp duty. Saying that it's an implementation of the Stamp Duty Act does not feel right to me, and I think it should be challenged in the court of law.
Now you're bringing another perspective to this discussion. You want us to challenge this in the court of law. Najib is actually smiling, nodding his head, but I'll come back to you, Najib, in a moment to get your reaction, from what Henry said. But Tunde, what do you agree with what Henry just said? I mean, he's bringing another perspective. He's talking about the legality now of these charges. How legal would you say it is?
So before I comment, I'd like to separate some things. I'd like to separate the Stamp Duty Act from the charges.
Okay.
Charges are charges by the bank that are providing a service and that are paid and that expect you to pay for that service. So that's capitalism. That's fine, and it's totally different from the Stamp Duty Act, which is actually a tax. Tax being taken by government from its citizens. Now there's a very specific procedure to go about introducing a new tax, a new federal tax in the country. It goes through the National Assembly, and there's a reason for that. We need to get a consensus and agree that we want to pay this tax, and that the tax makes sense to us as citizens. Therefore, the stamp duty tax that was introduced, I looked at the act that was referred to, and I know that there was a court case around this, which seemed to authorize the CBN to go ahead. Now, personally, I don't agree with charging the Stamp Duty Act, but it looks like the courts have spoken. Do we want to challenge the legality of that? The banks actually took this CBN to court over this matter, if I recall correctly, and the courts made a pronunciation. Now, do we want to challenge the courts? Then we do an appeal until it gets it. But it's a very important case for us as a country, because it will define in a lot of ways how taxes can be introduced. I looked at that act, and it specifically exempted bills of payment, so things like checks, things like currency. It specifically exempted those things from the Stamp Duty Act. However, the court has interpreted this differently. So I think a higher court needs to speak on this before we can make any other pronouncement on it. But for now, banks have started charging it because, I mean, they need to obey the subsisting directive before they can charge it.
Okay. Oh, Henry, we can't hear you. Hold on, Henry. Okay, what were you trying to say?
Okay, yeah, I was saying that the pronouncement I heard was that the charges were only meant for current accounts, but I heard that some people complained that even their savings accounts have been charged. I don't know if anybody heard about it. I don't know how true it is.
No, so I explained that. I explained that earlier. That there can be problems around implementation. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I was saying that there can be problems around implementation, and I explained why.
Okay.
The banking applications that these banks rely on are very complex, and when a directive like that comes out and says do it immediately, it becomes an issue when they try to implement. Sometimes they might not get it right the first time, and when feedback like this comes, they go back and they tweak it until they get it right. But okay, I think regulators also need to understand this and give the banks appropriate timelines for them to be able to implement things. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very well. Najib, you have been quiet. I mean, just for a while. But while Henry was talking about the legality of the charges and all that, you actually were nodding your head. I don't know if it wasn't concurrence or otherwise. But what do you think about that?
Yeah. The truth is, when this stamp duty charge was introduced, I was expecting Nigerians to really protest it, because it's not a thing of our system that you put your money in the bank, and the next thing you know, they say, oh, because you transferred to someone, you've been charged so amount. I expected people to protest, and if they had protested, I would have joined them. But myself, like I said from the beginning, I don't run a current account, so I waited for the people that run current accounts, and just few of them had issues with it. So I felt, okay, if it's well with you guys, no problem. But if they feel, I don't feel it's right, you understand? And the only reason I'm not fighting is because it's not affecting me. But if the people it's affecting want to go to court, I will support them. Now, the reason, originally, like, was it Nosa that said that the reason why they were trying to phase out the COT was to make the banks go do more of loans, get more of their revenue from loans, from interest they get from loans. And if the government is still supporting these deductions, overlooking the other charges, then it doesn't help at all. Banks need to go back to making money from giving a lot of their customers loans. We know that a majority of the customers of banks don't get loans from them. Small businesses, individuals, you go to the bank today, because they were making money from the oil tycoons, they are making money from the round trippers, But now those doors are closing down. You understand? With the way the economy is right now, those doors are closing down, and they need to make money. That's why we are seeing these transactions going haywire right now. They need to make money. Oil prices have dropped. You know, those other places they used to get money from, it's not coming anymore. So they want to get money. But instead of going to, and government is trying to corner them into that axis of, you have to give out loans. But they are still fighting and looking for other ways to make money. And the government is not working hard enough to say, okay, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't charge this. I feel that if we fight, like Nosa is saying, if we fight these charges, if we go to court and drag these issues, that the banks will have no choice. Once they have little places to maneuver, even the government needs to allow the banks, if coming in with this stamp duty charge, it makes the bank feel like we can also charge all sorts of things. But like I said, if the people is affecting want to go to court, we'll support, and everybody, Nigerians will come out and say no to this stamp duty thing. I don't see any justification. The Stamp Duty Act he has talked about, I've perused it, and it just seems like using it to justify this thing just seems like a joke. It doesn't give much back into it. So I'd like to see Nigerians, if they are against it, let them protest. But aside from the stamp duty, the other charges, we need to look into them. Like I said, I support the ATM charges. I would even like to see more ATM charges because it costs the banks a lot to run those things. But the other charges I see at the end of the year, they tell you ATM maintenance fee. Like Tunde said, they structured it in a way that you could pay once. If we are paying 65 naira per ATM transaction, and at the end of the year you are coming to say 100 naira, I don't see how those two tally. Either you are charging me one or you are charging the other. You understand? But the two, I can't see how it works. So we need to challenge these things, and it will help us if we stop these banks from charging all these transaction and opening account and all sorts of charges. It will force them to start giving out loans, and small businesses, individuals will be the ones to benefit. So let's see how it goes, but in court and wherever we want to challenge it, we should go. So that's my own stand.
All right, very legit. Henry, let me just come back to you to get your own, let me put it this way, testimony, because earlier on, Najib told us what he has been experiencing, in terms of, making those charges from his operations as a savings account owner. But what has been the experience for you, looking at the fact that you are not even here, you're not in Nigeria, like you are out of the country, and then,
okay.
I mean, yeah, I know sometimes you might be forced to use your ATM, or I don't know how you operate, but if you do, what has been your experiences in terms of, the charges that you receive by using your now bank account in general?
Okay, well, to be honest, I haven't operated my bank account since I left the country, so I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question, but at least I can speak based on the experience I've heard from others, like family, friends, and at least the people I've heard from have been complaining so far about these charges. The question I'm asking myself, that I've been asking myself since I heard the policy, is whether all of these charges are not a disincentive to the cashless policy that the CBN was trying to implement the other time. Because, I mean, some years back, from 2012, the CBN had a policy of trying to encourage more Nigerians to open bank accounts and operate like a cashless society, the cashless society thing. So, I mean, if people, especially in the informal sector, traders and market women, are going to be encouraged to open bank accounts and begin to do more transactions through the banking system, maybe the question we need to ask ourselves is whether any of these policies is a disincentive to that. Are we driving these people out to leave the banking sector and go back to operating savings accounts through a colo or whatever? So we understand that the government needs to raise revenue. That is correct. The banks too are trying to use the opportunity of low oil prices to boost their revenue base so that they don't declare lower profits than usual to their shareholders. All of these are understandable, but there needs to be some kind of balance. The CBN needs to take a holistic look at this and ask themselves if the policies that are being undertaken now are going to be in the overall benefit of the society as a whole, or whether they are just, just trying to help the banks raise revenue, considering the fact that the current CBN governor is an ex-banker. So some people are going to ask the questions as to whether there's an issue of conflict of interest here, So I think this policy is a disincentive to the drive to encourage more Nigerians to open bank accounts and operate through the banking system and have a more cashless society. So the CBN really needs to take a hard look at this.
All right, Henry. Tunde, let me just come back to you now. We should be wrapping up. Here saying that it is a disincentive to the cashless society that the CBN is actually promoting. Actually, not the CBN, but apparently that's where we are right now. It's when the jet age and all these things will just naturally fall in place. And you made mention of Nigerians, or like those in the informal sector. Are they like supposed to go back and start doing things the old way? Saving in the boxes and what have you? Like, I just had a second thought about that. But we're wrapping up. Let me just get your last word on this issue.
All right. So my last words on this issue. First thing is this: businesses, all the entities involved in payments, banks, card schemes, switching companies, and everybody, they need to remember that they have to operate in a profitable manner. So some charges are justified. How they apply those charges might be the things that we need to monitor. So if you were meant to be charged 100 naira, if you're charged 600 naira, then that's a problem. But where the charges are just and fair, I think then the correct position to charge them. The second thing, which is a separate conversation, is that government should not surreptitiously use the banking system as a means to introduce new taxes. It is a disincentive. There are no other ways to put it. It is a disincentive. It will affect the bankers. It will affect adoption of banking by this our very large unbanked and uncovered sector already. I mean, my mechanic today will prefer that I give him his money rather than send money to him because he feels they will take 15 naira. And we assume that people are not as informed as they are, but they actually are informed. So my mechanic, who is not a very hooked up guy, is aware that if he gets a deposit in his account, somebody will take 15 naira away. He says, give me cash. And people are beginning to circumvent the payment system. And once people get used to circumventing the payment systems, it introduces a lot of problems that we do not going to have. That's why when the former CBN government introduced the cashless policy, it was such a fantastic initiative. We need consistency of policy that will make sure that these kind of incentives continue to grow. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Henry, what's your own last word? We can't see you though.
Okay, my last word. Well,
Henry, we can't see you. What's wrong with your video?
Well, I don't know what the problem is actually. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, I don't have much else to add. I'll just say that the CBN needs to take a very hard look at this. The Stamp Duty Act does not seem to make an express provision for this policy. I would think that if the government is seeking to raise revenue, they would be looking to amend the tax laws by going through the parliament. I think that's a better and a cleaner option towards raising revenue. For example, we know we have one of the lowest rates of value-added tax in the world. Maybe the government will look into necessary amendment of the Value-Added Tax Act, such that the rate is increased if they want to raise more revenue. The point is, if they're trying to do what we know needs to be done in order to help government cover whether through the storm caused by low crude oil prices, the right thing should be done, the proper channels should be followed. And as for the banks, I think the policies that were introduced towards encouraging them to lend more to the real sector should be continued. Yes, they need to make they need to generate charges for the services that they deliver, but the charges should be reasonable, and banks should not. The charges should not be made such that the banks are dependent on them as opposed to their traditional means of income, which should be income from loans and advances given to the real sector. So the CBN needs to take a hard look at these issues and going forward.
All right. Thank you very well, Henry, for your contributions. Najib, let's also come to you to get your last word before we wrap up.
All right. My final word is that these charges, especially, I think we have to do away with the stamp duty charge. I don't see how it works for government. Like the other two guys have said, the cashless policy thing, it's one of the main concerns I raised when the stamp duty came up. You know, we are trying to encourage more people. We are saying there is a lot of Nigerians that are unbanked. There are a lot of Nigerians unbanked, and we need to get them banked. And they are, right now, they are hearing that we are being charged, we are being taxed. Our bank accounts sitting down there trying to just run bank transactions. Our bank accounts are being taxed. And they are worried. They are saying that, oh, so this is what they want us to come into. So we have to weigh it. Do we want to discourage people from getting banked? You know, do we want to turn the cashless policy on its own head? So we have to look at that. Then also, aside from the taxes, the bank charges themselves, the CBN has to regulate properly. Where the banks are offering services that need to be charged for, you know, CBN should encourage them and, you know, let the people know that this is why you are paying for this. But when I'm asked to use an SMS to check my bank account and they charge 20 naira for that, and aside from that, I'm going to be charged at the end of the month an SMS for that same transaction, it's a problem. So the CBN, the government, they have to make sure that the banks are not overcharging people for services they should not be charging. You understand? If they allow these banks to keep charging monies arbitrarily, these banks will not go into where they are trying to push them. These banks will not give out loans. They are trying to make sure that the banks make their money from giving out loans. So if you allow the banks charge all sorts of charges, it won't make any sense. So they should regulate the charges the banks charge customers. They should allow banks to charge where it is necessary. Then they themselves, the government on its own, they should not just bring out any tax and tax people's bank accounts. They should try and get rid of this stamp duty thing. It does not help. It doesn't help our accounts. It doesn't help their cause, their cashless policy and other things they're trying to put in place. So that's my own take on it.
All right, very well, Najib. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. Thank you, Henry, as well. Thank you, Tunde, also for all coming this afternoon and sharing your thoughts with us on the program. But that's where we have to leave it till we come back again next week with another topic. But for now, it's goodbye. My name is Victor Matthias, and once again, it is a Google Plus Hangout for Channel Speed.